This is the Turf Zone Podcast, your central information and news hub, bringing together professionals from turf associations across multiple states to share things to help you and your business. Brought to you in partnership with our friends at the Tennessee Turfgrass Association. This episode is sponsored in part by Sod, world-class service on demand. Visit us online at www.buysod.com. Now, let's get in the zone.
Welcome to the Turf Zone. In this episode of Tennessee Turfgrass, we're talking to Jason Bradley, golf course superintendent at Memphis Country Club. Jason, how are you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
Doing good. Thank you for taking some time to talk to me today. Melissa Martin, the executive director at TTA, suggested that you and I talk, and I just wanted to get a little background. How did you get into the turfgrass industry and end up where you are today?
Well, I always loved the game of golf. My dad got me started super early. I started playing golf when I was, first able to walk, basically. Put a club in my hand and grew up playing golf. Some of my fondest memories are going to the golf course with my dad at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday and Sunday, play golf at, 6 and then be home by 11 o'clock, start the day. So always was around the golf course. Came across an article in high school that college in SUNY Delhi was offering a class in turf management. And, I thought it would be interesting. So I looked into that, and lo and behold, I signed up. They accepted me and started my turfgrass voyage, if you will. So I've been in the business now for over 25 years. I started back in 1996. So with a history that long in turfgrass and kind of finding that direction early on, where did you go from there after you took the class and then college and a degree? How did your path bring you to where you are now? Well, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. Actually, it's a little city called Dunkirk, which is 40 miles southwest of Buffalo, New York. But, not many people know Dunkirk, so I refer to Buffalo. And the winters there, as you know, are pretty harsh. So it's a 6-month work window there in New York, Western New York. So I had some relatives out in Las Vegas. So when I graduated college, I decided to go out and try to work out in Las Vegas. I worked out there for about a year, got kind of bored of it because it is literally just Vegas. There's nothing else really around except for casinos and golf courses. Moved back home for 6 months and had some family in the Carolinas, Greensboro, and went down there for a weekend looking for a job. And a friend from back home called me and said he heard that I was in the area. He happened to be in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I went down there to visit him. And they hired me on the spot as a second assistant superintendent, making $9 an hour, which at the time to me was an insane amount of money. And I worked at Highland Creek as my first assistant's job for about 2 years, and eventually got picked up at Charlotte Country Club, where I spent 10 years as a senior assistant superintendent, and eventually moved on to River Hills Country Club, which was my first golf course superintendent job. I worked there for 5 years, and then interviewed here at Memphis Country Club, and been here starting my 6th year right now.
I'm interested in the regional history of you moving around, starting near Buffalo and then Las Vegas. I'm with you. I can't imagine spending a real long time out there. And then the Carolinas, of course, beautiful and fantastic golf there. So, but I want to know now that you are entrenched in Tennessee, living and there in Memphis, what has been a unique challenge of managing turfgrass where you are right now?
The weather. I thought it was going to parallel the Charlotte market, but it does not. The weather is brutal. The summers, the humidity are just brutal. The heat, And then the winter, you got some cold nights here, and then the rain. The rain is just, I did not expect all this rain. I think one year we had 75, 78 inches, something like that. And, the winter months, we try to do a lot of project work, cutting trees down, sod work, cart path repair. And you struggle to get anything done because it's either too wet or, everything's frozen. It's tough. So the weather was my biggest shock moving here.
Absolutely. And I've lived in all three parts of Tennessee. I grew up in Northwest Tennessee, so not too far from you. And I see back from friends back home and farms, and the rain and the storms and the cleanup and the trees and it's never ending if you're working in nature in any context, whether it's in a more agricultural setting or golf, for sure. Okay, so what's been the biggest challenge you've had, not just specifically there in Memphis where you are, but climbing the ladder and being in the turfgrass industry in general?
Oof, that's a good question. I would have to say it varies, I can't believe I'm getting ready to say this, by decade almost. Originally, it was finding a job. When I first started, it was breaking into being an assistant. I think colleges were just churning kids out at the time, and we had a hard time just finding an assistant's position. So, my first few years, it was just landing that assistant's position. After that, it was, trying to grapple with member expectations. Being a young kid, a young assistant, learning to deal with all that, I don't want to say heat, but the noise coming from members or guests. Highland Creek, my first course was a public golf course. So you'd hear a lot of vocal opinions from the guests, and you'd have to kind of dig through that feedback to find out what were the real issues out there. And now, back up, when I was an assistant, I was assistant for 10 years, not by choice, because we couldn't find a superintendent position at the time. Even in the Carolinas is very competitive. There's golf courses that have, assistants 10 deep right now in the Carolinas, just because the market is very tight right now. So breaking into that superintendent role was pretty difficult. And right now it's the labor. The labor market is just terrible. We raised our rate of pay up, and we still are not competitive with the housing market, the construction, the landscapers, the roofers. We cannot pay competitive with that. Not to mention Memphis being a hub for Nike, FedEx, you name it, with all these warehouses. They're paying warehouse workers in some instances $20 an hour and to work in the air conditioning. So we're paying what we're paying. It's tough to compete with that, especially when you're outside, sometimes in the rain, sometimes in 100-degree heat. Nobody really wants to do that right now.
How do you adjust operations when labor is such a struggle?
We've got a core staff that has really stuck with us. So I've got a base of assistants that have been here. For instance, my one assistant, Mario, has been here almost 30 years now. So he knows this property better than anybody. I got a younger gentleman that's been with us 2 years, and we sit down, we plan every day out, whether the day before, and then I call him up on my ride to work and I say, hey, what are we going to do today? Has anybody called you? Is anybody sick? Have they texted you? Because half the time it's dealing with, hey, I'm not going to make it today. So we plan the schedule out the day before, and we know what we need to get done each week. And, we've got ways around that. We can't walk more greens every day like we used to. So some days we're triplexing. Some days, we might have to skip breaking bunkers to get other projects done. So it's just structuring your day and taking the time out to plan well in advance of what obstacles you might run into.
I've heard when I ask about challenges in the industry, I can count on one hand the number of times labor has not been the answer over many interviews. And that includes most of the time when I talk to other golf course superintendents in Tennessee. So that brings me to your involvement in TTA. And I know that we've got our regional associations that are pretty regular with meeting. Has that part, that networking with other people in your position across the state, been helpful to you when it's time to adjust to the challenges that probably all of you are facing?
No doubt. I go back to the Carolinas. I worked my way up. I was eventually the president of our local there in the Carolinas, in the Charlotte chapter. So I spent time on that board. I want to say 8 years on that board until I was president. The networking with everybody, knowing the vendors, the other superintendents, the peers in the market, makes a huge difference. Be able to pick the phone up and say, hey, I'm short 4 guys. How are you guys getting by with 10 guys where I'm used to having 15 or even 16? How are you doing it? Walk me through your day. Those conversations are priceless. I mean, to be able to call up, superintendent in Nashville, Chattanooga, and for me, Carolinas even, to discuss pay rates and how often people are mowing greens or raking bunkers. That's, it's invaluable.
Absolutely. So speaking of folks that you can call on and just bounce ideas off of, do you have a mentor in the industry that you've that's kind of followed you along these 25 years?
Yes. Yes. John Zielinski over at Charlotte Country Club. He's still the superintendent out there. He came to Charlotte in 2007. It was an interesting time. I was a senior assistant. They had let go of the previous superintendent in 2006. And they called me into the office and said, you're going to be the intern superintendent until we find somebody. And by the way, we're starting a complete golf course renovation project in November. So go ahead and start planning for that. And John didn't arrive until March. So we had everything kind of planned out. And John and I kind of clicked from day one. And, I talked to him probably twice a month now still, and bounce a ton of ideas off of him, asking lots of questions. I mean, he's a friend and a mentor, and I would definitely want to be where I am right now without him.
That's awesome. Okay, so we've covered a lot of work stuff. What do you do in your free time? Do you still get to play some golf?
I try. I think I played 6 rounds maybe this year, maybe 7. My wife Jennifer, we've got 2 small children. My son Tyler turned 6 next month, and my daughter Tegan just turned 4 last month in August. So we're tied up with soccer and baseball and doing homework. My son's in kindergarten now, so believe it or not, it just blows my mind that they send these kids home with homework in kindergarten. So we're doing that and running around. So it's tough to get out and play golf, especially with the hours we're putting in here. But I try. My parents followed me down here, to see their grandkids. So they live in Mumford. So it's nice to get out and play golf with my dad whenever I can still. And other than that, when I do have some downtime, I enjoy reading a lot of nonfiction history stuff and, just relaxing.
It's always unfortunate the free time doesn't always match up to the number of things you'd like to be doing in that free time. All right. So, Jason, I'll close with this. What would be your advice for someone thinking about a career in the turfgrass industry?
I still think it's a great industry to get into. You're basically guaranteed a job for life. I still say that because you can literally call up any golf course in any market and say, hey, I'm in the business. Are you looking to hire? And they'll hire you, whether that's somebody that will sit on a mower, walk mow, assistant, irrigation tech. You can get a job. And it has its ups and downs like everything else. I mean, it's great that we get to work outside year round, but The downside is we're working outside year round, depending on where you're at. It's been great for me and my family. I've been fortunate enough to be invited to a lot of great golf courses and a lot of great events. And like anything else, though, you get out of it what you put into it. It is a lot of hard work. It's a lot of networking. Takes a lot of your spare time, even outside of work, to get to where I feel like I'm at right now. And it's not always as easy as it seems to kind of sit in that superintendent chair. It's not all about growing grass anymore. It's a political game. So, what you learn in school is great, but the real lessons are learned in the superintendent's chair. You got to feel that weight as a superintendent, really grasp and respect the position.
Absolutely. I can't imagine those competing pressures from golfers and from board and from all of the many angles that you guys are having to work with. Memphis Country Club is great. The membership here is just phenomenal. And the Memphis market is a little less competitive than the Charlotte market was. Charlotte market, I want to say there were 60 or 65 golf courses in that, area. Here, there's just not that many. And the competition in the Charlotte market was crazy. And I'd like to joke around a little bit where the members at each club would go play and say, well, course XYZ is filling their divots with gold dust. Why are we not doing that? We need to be doing that. We don't have any of that here. I'm sure that exists, but it's not nearly like it was in the Charlotte market. The pressure there was just was tough, and it's real here, but it's not as bad as it was in the Charlotte market. Jason, thank you again for taking the time to chat today. Don't miss an episode of Tennessee Turfgrass. Subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit us at theturfzone.com.
You've been listening to The Turf Zone. Thank you to our sponsors, including Buy Sod, world-class service on demand. Visit us online at www.buysod.com. For more episodes of The Turf Zone, visit theturfzone.com and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app.